Yeah.
Leo, I heard you're putting your own team in this year for BNBL. You have one more.
Those days
year.
are over, my friend. Oh my God. I'm only a second knee. I live my life vicariously through my kid, Eddie, although the commissioner still plays.
You were a good player. I used to watch you all the time.
Oh, thank you. We had a lot of fun back then. A lot of goodwill done in those mayor's games that we used to have.
Yeah.
And we had a pretty good ISD team back in the day. I think we used to play the city council, so maybe we can revive that.
Right, right. Did you play basketball, Commissioner? You played?
Yes. I'm still trying to now. I mean, not currently now.
Okay.
But I'm still active in the league.
Okay.
Before things got closed down.
Yeah, right, right.
Permission to coach.
Yeah, it was tough too because my team ended the season in first place. We had a bye. We were ready for the playoffs, and then everything got shut down.
Right.
Council, I think we're set to go. We have a Galaxy Tab A in the waiting room, and if it's Mr. Tinkle, he'll just have to raise his blue hand, and we'll advance him. Other than that, I think we can get started whenever you're ready.
Okay, I'll do that.
There it is.
Good morning, everybody. This is Boston City Councilor Ed Flynn. I represent District 2, and I'm joined so far by colleagues Councilor Braden, Councilor Bach, and Councilor Flaherty. Councilor Anissa Asabi George, Council President Kim Janey. If I missed anyone yet, I will include them. This hearing, today we have a hearing on docket 0935, order for a hearing on pest control and illegal dumping in the city of Boston. The hearing was sponsored by myself and City Councilor Liz Braden. The hearing is being recorded and live streamed at boston.gov/citycouncil/TV. It will be rebroadcast on Comcast Channel 8, RCN Channel 82, Verizon 1964. The Zoom link to provide public testimony for the hearing can be found by emailing Shane, SHANE .pac@boston.gov. Please make sure that your Zoom handle is your full name. When you are called, please state your name and affiliation, residence, and limit your comments to 2 minutes to ensure all comments and concerns can be heard. If you are unable to provide testimony today, you may submit written testimony or a 2-minute video for our record by emailing the committee at ccc.cns@boston.gov or filling out the form on our website within 48 hours following this hearing. I will first let the sponsors of the hearing offer brief remarks, and then I'll ask my city council colleagues that are present also to offer brief remarks. And after that, we'll go right into the panelist, which I will introduce very shortly. At this time, Councilor Braden, would you like to open it up with opening comments?
Thank you, Chairman Flynn. Thank you so much, for your leadership on this issue. During the COVID crisis, we have heard increased reports of the problems related to rat infestations and rodents in our neighborhoods. However, out here in Alston, Brighton, the pandemic, long before the pandemic, we had a problem with a perennial issue with rodents, to the extent that our neighborhood is colloquially called Rat City. And I'm very interested to listen to the presentation this morning and hear from the experts about how we're trying to manage this situation, and hopefully be able to share some good information with our constituents about how they may be able to help address this issue, and how we can all work in partnership to alleviate this problem. It's a very distressing situation. I spoke with a constituent last week who had rats in his home that had managed to get in, and it's a very difficult situation to resolve. It's not only emotionally distressing, but it's also potentially a public health issue. So I'm really interested and excited to hear what folks have to say this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Braden. I'll offer my brief remarks. As Councillor Braden mentioned, we have received reports of rodent infestations activities in recent months, and we have had neighbors reach out who are seeing an uptick in pest activities. This may be caused in part by the pandemic. The CDC has warned that environmental health and rodent control agencies should expect reports of unusual or aggressive rodent behavior due to restaurants and other food sources for rats and rodents closing down during this pandemic. At the same time, we should also talk about illegal dumping when discussing rodent control, as trash that is not properly disposed of can attract rodents and cause other public health issues. So I wanted to discuss ways that the city can adequately handle these issues, including talking about enforcement, public awareness, campaign outreach about proper ways of disposing trash and preventing rodent activities. And for the record, I have worked with the dedicated city employees on this issue, and they are very professional and doing a good job. And we want to continue working with you to improve the quality of life for residents throughout the city. At this time, I'm going to ask my colleagues to offer a brief opening statement. I believe Councillor Bach was the first one, so I'm going to go to Councillor Kenzie Bach.
Thank you so much, Councillor Flynn. I just want to echo what my colleagues have said. I represent a number of downtown neighborhoods from the West End through Beacon Hill, Back Bay, Fenway, and Mission Hill. And I think we're dealing with a significant new rat issue in each of those. I can picture an alleyway in each of those that we've been seeing unusual activity in. And I think it's just really important to stress, you know, the things that we love about the city, which are the way that our residential neighborhoods and our you know, business districts are mixed in together and abut each other, also can exacerbate this problem. And it's one of the reasons that the city has to be super on top of it, because it's really a collective issue. And so, and it's collective in the sense that we need the city and the great folks who are here today. And then we also need to get the word out to all of our neighbors, both businesses and residential, about how to best take care of trash and minimize this issue. And I know I'm very appreciative on the block I happen to live in, on a bunch of neighbors sort of voluntarily really try to put their trash out as close to pickup time as possible. But we still, you know, we see these issues, and lately they've been really increasing in acuity. So I'm grateful to everyone in the city who works on this. And I think of it as a really fundamental quality of life issue, and as the other councillors have alluded to, also a public health issue. And I'm grateful to Councillor Flynn for adding in the element of illegal dumping, because I think too often folks think that bringing trash downtown and leaving it in places that are people's neighborhoods, you know, is an acceptable or allowable thing to do. And especially in these times, we really have to crack down on that. So Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor Balk. I believe the next person that is up is Councilor Flaherty.
Thank you, Chairman Flynn, and thanks to you and Councilor Braden for sponsoring. You and I have dealt with some stuff in our own neighborhood, but I'm getting calls citywide with an increase in visibility, particularly around our public schools that have the dumpsters, and folks are taking their household trash and other trash and debris and dumping it as if like no one's watching, no one's paying attention, but neighbors are watching and paying attention and sending photos, et cetera. So I've been dealing closely, obviously, with Boston Public Schools to either put some gates or locks around those dumpsters to keep a closer eye on it. But have to say to Commissioner Iris, your Rodent Control Division and in the Code Enforcement Division has been super to deal with, very responsive, whether it's reaching out to Leo Boucher, who's on this call, and just jumps right into action. It's whether it could be Bobby Chan, it could be John Ulrich, even Ollie Gray. Everyone's just throwing a shoulder into it. So I appreciate the attention to detail. I know how seriously you guys take the issue from a quality of life and a cleanliness standpoint. So here to work with you as best we can. And obviously you all also have Steve Tankle, who's on here as well, and even in Captain Mack. And so everyone pays attention to detail. When you reach out, you give them an address. There's usually a prompt and appropriate response, and there's good positive feedback from constituents. And hopefully we can continue to do that. And Leo will tell you, it's anytime we're talking, we immediately talk about the Norwegian rat, and/or we're talking about the latest technology around the frozen ice stuff. So the more that we have the ability to use that technology, the more hopefully we'll be able to root out rodents that are infesting our communities. And what we saw around the dumpster activity eventually goes into someone's yard, or worse, goes into their home. And we also have to target a lot of the construction projects and making sure that as part of the permitting process that they're baiting, but that we're doing quality control around that, and we're making sure that baiting is regular, and they're updating and rebaiting as much as possible throughout the duration of the project. Sometimes we see baiting initially right at the onset of the project, and then as projects languish, they kind of take their eye off the ball on the rodent control piece of it, and then we start getting the calls, and then you guys start getting the calls. And so our hope is that on the private side of this house, that we'll continue to have developers maintain a high level of standard around their sort of rodent control and abatement processes. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, and look forward to hearing from the experts on this.
Thank you, Councilor Flaherty. Councilor Sabi George, then it'll be Councilor Janey, followed by Councilor Mejia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to you and Councilor Breeden for bringing this before us today. Rats, although not a wonderful topic to discuss, certainly an important topic here in the city of Boston. As we know, it's not just around quality of life issues, it's certainly around serious and significant health issues and the risk to our public health and to our sanity. So just happy that we have this before us, and encouraged by those that are here to offer testimony on behalf of the administration and the commissioner and those that work for ISD doing these what can't be enjoyable work. Sometimes don't mean to laugh because it is a serious issue and one that we need to address. So thank you to the makers, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Sabi George. Council President Janey?
Thank you so much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you so much. Many thanks to you, Mr. Chair, to Councilor Braden. Want to thank Commissioner Iris, your entire team, certainly Aisha Miller. I always have to give her a shout out. But more related, I think, to this topic, certainly other members of the team like Steve Tankle and John Ulrich and others that Councilor Flaherty mentioned. This is an important topic. While I don't cover downtown, I do have the neighborhoods of Roxbury, South End, Dorchester, and Fenway. My district is densely populated. Parts of my district already have 2 trash days because of this history and the dense population and illegal dumping, as well as rats and rodents have been an ongoing issue. And I would acknowledge, like many of you have already said, with the quarantine and COVID, there is just new behavior with rodents. They're everywhere, and it's not just rats. I mean, it's squirrels, it's other kinds of critters. If you travel throughout the rest of Massachusetts, other towns are dealing with their equivalent, whether that be skunks or some other kind of creature. And so, you know, people, the creatures are out looking for food, and our behavior has shifted and changed. And so their behavior has shifted and changed, and they are more brazen and bold. So I'm looking forward to this hearing and figuring out ways that we can strategize to ensure that the quality of life issues in our city are being held up, and that residents don't have, you know, this additional burden to deal with during a very difficult time. So thank you again, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the administration for all your work in this area, and to all of the residents for their dedication to their communities. The other thing with the change in time for trash pickup in my district, and I know Councilor Flynn can also speak to this in the South End, you know, there were also worries about whether or not this was going to exacerbate a rodent problem, because people would then be putting their trash out the night before instead of the morning of, and the trash is there. So I would be interested, as we get this conversation started, as an update on whether we've seen an increase related to that shift in time for trash delivery. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you again to everyone on the call.
Thank you, Council President. Councilor Mejia?
Thank you, Chair, and Councilor Breeden for calling this hearing. You know, it's interesting because I always talk about all means all, and all issues are important in the city of Boston. And so this is one that I know we've heard a lot from our constituents at various community meetings. So happy to join the conversation. I just would like to point out two things. While I know that this particular hearing is specifically around illegal dumping, I also just wanted to make note that when it comes to construction, that is also a reason why we see rodents creeping up in certain neighborhoods. And I know that that's something that I've heard from folks, that when there's a lot of construction happening in certain spaces, we see an uptick in certain neighborhoods. So I just kind of want to like flag that as another issue as to why that may be. And I also I would be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to Commissioner Irish. We went to Dorchester High. But more importantly, like his entire team, I would have to say, you guys are always on it. Aisha Miller, the whole squad, first to respond, whether it be through Facebook, text messages, emails, your team is on it when it comes to responding to constituent services. So I just want to thank you all for your hard work and continue partnership with our office. We really do appreciate all that you do and continue to do for the city. And thank you everyone for being here. All means all, even the rats, y'all.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. I don't believe there's any other city councilors on just yet. So at this time, I would like to introduce our panelists that are here with us. Thank you for attending, but more importantly, for the work that you've been doing for many years in the city, including Commissioner Dion Irish, Inspectional Services, Leo Boucher, also at Inspectional Services, who's the Assistant Commissioner, and Steve Tanko, who's at Code Enforcement, Department of Public Works. I see Steve and I see Eric Prentice. We're part of a monthly meeting with Mary Chin at the Asian American Civic Association. So I want to say thank you to Steve and to Eric as well. At this time, could I ask Commissioner Irish to offer opening comments?
Good morning, Chairman, and good morning to all city councilors. Thank you for your feedback, and also I want to just thank the employees of Inspection Services. I know how hard they've been working. It's been a challenging time for us where we've actually seen an increase in demand for our service, and I know they're working tirelessly on this. So I want to just publicly thank the employees who have been responsive to you, and I'm very glad to hear that. Also, this is not a glamorous issue, but as you all mentioned before, it's a very important issue. It is one of many important issues that we have to deal with as a city. It's quality of life, it's public health. We take it seriously. The mayor takes it seriously, and I know you do, and I appreciate the fact that you're elevating it to this conversation so that we can publicly dialogue about it. We can share what we have been doing, hear your feedback, and also use it as an opportunity to educate the public, because this is truly one of those issues where we need everyone to be on board and to take all the steps that are necessary to keep rodent control population under control. As you all have mentioned, this is not a new issue. This is something that we are continually addressing. We have, with me today, we have Assistant Commissioner Leo Boucher, who's an expert in this area, and he leads a team of experts. We have 14 and soon to be 15 licensed professionals who work for ISD who are dealing with this issue beginning at 4 a.m. on a daily basis. We have several shifts, 4 a.m. shift, a 6 a.m. shift, and an 8 a.m. shift. So we can actually do some work that needs to be done while folks are still asleep, so that they could wake up to a safe city, hopefully without any sightings. But we understand that we still see sightings, but it's something that we continually just need to work on. We have some core elements to our strategy. Public education is one of those elements. Enforcement, we have a variety of ways we do enforcement. We work along with code enforcement, and they'll speak to the fact that they're regularly issuing fines to address bad behavior. We also issue violations at ISD that lead to hearings, administrative hearings, and in some cases we'll go as far as taking cases to court because we take this seriously. I know we have currently like 18 cases that are in the court pipeline. Rapid response is also important to us. So I'm glad to hear from you that we're providing that. Proactive prevention, and as I mentioned before, public education is a key part of it. Whenever we see an uptick, we're doing leafletting, we're doing community walks, we're going door to door, and we're talking to residents in impacted areas so that they could understand what's going on and what steps they can take to alleviate the issue. And our folks are also licensed pesticide applicators, as I mentioned before, sir. In some cases, we are providing on a very limited basis private control just initially, and then thereafter we're requiring folks to have their own pest control put in place. But on an ongoing basis, we provide pest control for public places, parks and things of that nature. So I'll leave some of that for Leo to talk about. Well, we also enforce the city's site cleanliness ordinance, which is also critical, because controlling the rodent population is controlling their food sources, removing places of harborage. So our site cleanliness ordinance requires that any location that uses bulk refuse, that they have a site cleanliness plan that's approved by us so we can ensure the proper handling and disposal of trash. And there was a case this morning on my way in, ironically, when I was driving down Columbia Road, and I noticed a case where we had overflowing dumpsters. And I'm like, this is exactly what we're trying to address. So Leo was on it right away, and so that is being addressed. But I would encourage folks are reporting sightings to us. Those numbers clearly reflect that. But what I would also like to see is, and remind folks, is to also report to us when you see dumpsters that are overflowing, when you see folks who don't have proper receptacles, if there's no covers on them, if trash is overflowing in a residential property, those all collectively contribute to this type of issue that we're trying to control. So I will leave it at there, and I'm going to ask Assistant Commissioner Boucher just to talk some more about the things that we're doing. I know that dry ice comes up on us, so you can talk about what we're doing with dry ice and whatever else you think that needs to be covered that I didn't cover. Leo.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Mr. Chair and councilors. I appreciate your time today. Yeah, this is a very, very, very panicky issue. It evokes panic immediately. Rats traditionally have been the horror movie stuff. It's the things that frighten folks, and quite frankly, I am very, very concerned about our uptick. But let me give you a little bit of background of what we've determined in dealing with some of the specialists that we speak with, entomologists throughout the country and other cities. So New York City, Chicago, New Orleans, DC, Seattle, and the United Kingdom are some examples of cities and countries and nations that are experiencing an uptick. What happened was a perfect storm. We had this awful COVID begin, and the quarantines began in March. At the same time as that occurred, spring is a breeding season for rodents. So now the rodents are breeding during that particular time. And you compound that with the fact that we've eliminated all the commercial trash that they're accustomed to eating. That commercial trash has reverted back to the neighborhood. So most of you folks who are on this call probably reverted to takeout food and things of that nature, as opposed to going to the supermarket. You know, people are using DoorDash and Uber Eats. I know my nephew's making a fortune delivering Burger King food, for example. All of those changes in practices resulted in the trash being moved from the commercial areas into more heavily residential areas. So once again, as folks said, the rats were starting to migrate towards where their food source was. One of the big misconceptions and one of the scary things that is always publicized is that rats are more aggressive. It's very, very, very critical that we understand they're more aggressive towards each other, not more aggressive towards humans. That's a very important fact to get out there. We deal with an entomologist, Bobby Corrigan, who's internationally known. He's based in New York. We've had him to Boston several times, and he's done different projects with us. And he is very, very adamant about the fact that the word is getting out there that the rodents are becoming aggressive. They're becoming aggressive towards each other because they're fighting for that same piece of food. So that's a critical component that folks definitely need to do. And they definitely need to understand. So we've changed that. And in addition to that, as we can all attest to, we've had some incredibly mild winters. So the kill off that we normally get during the seasonal times was reduced. And as a result, we did get an increased population. So that's just a little bit of the history. Illegal storage. So Steve will deal with a lot of the illegal dumping and illegal storage. I was fortunate enough to work with Steve at Code Enforcement, and we're both on the same page, shall we say, as far as the code enforcement and action goes. But the storage issues are critical as well. What's happened is, you know, you've got a lot of folks who don't particularly care how they place their trash out, throwing that recycle material out with 2 slices of pizza left in it. Throwing remnants of food out, you know, not closing their covers in their dumpsters or their barrels. All of those things result in food for rodents. And as I always tell folks, rodents don't need filet mignon, and they don't need spring water. You know, a small puddle and some scraps will suffice for a food source. So it's very critical that we focus on that as well, making sure that people are putting their trash, storing their trash properly. Very, very big piece of the puzzle. In addition to that, the illegal dumping issues that Steve will get into in much more detail. Illegal dumping is not an issue in the residential areas as far as barrels and things of that nature. It's, as Councilor Flaherty alluded to, you know, the BHA and the BPS are experiencing folks going into their areas and dumping in the dumpsters and that type of thing. So that's the big illegal dumping piece. Our primary focus is proper storage of trash, proper storage of that food waste. And if we can knock that down, and how we do that is through education. We've embarked on probably the biggest education component that we've had since I've been at ISD. We're literally pricing out of our flyer materials. All of our materials are being distributed. All of our inspectors are focusing on making sure that folks understand how they can prevent rodent activity in the neighborhoods. In addition to that, we've got inspectors out there that will do a one-time baiting. So, and that's generally if you're the victim of somebody else's poor sanitation. So if the property next to you is in disrepair and you've got rodent activity, we as a city will make the commitment to assist you, because it's the right thing to do, and because folks shouldn't have to suffer because the neighbor's not doing what they're supposed to do. It's ironic, in a lot of situations we're finding now, the guys are much more diligent as far as getting good constituent contact. One of the biggest things you can tell your constituents, this is huge, and we do it every time we do a walk, every time we do an education. And if they see a rat, where did it go to and where did it go from? If you don't have that information, that's fine. One or the other will suffice. You know, are there trash issues? That rat's probably running from where it's living to a food source. So that would be the general travel. They live within 150 feet of where they eat. I think they've branched out, shall we say, because obviously the food sources aren't as available, but that's very, very critical that folks do that. And the other thing is I encourage people, 311, 311, 311. If I'm out in a neighborhood working on a complaint and I see a problem at an adjacent property, I put it at the 311 because that 311 complaint automatically gets generated to ISD and automatically goes into my queue of complaints. So I could put that in there. It's the old way. It's the old way of walking around, Counselor. Not to go back in the old days, but your father always used to tell me when I started in city government, make sure you have a pen and a piece of paper.
Yeah.
So that's how we used to do that. Now we do it electronically. We punch it into 311. We put all the pertinent information in there. When we get back to the office, it's already in the queue and ready to go to the inspector. We call the inspector immediately, but we've got that complaint recorded, and that is important. It's another reason why I think our numbers are up. Our numbers would be up anyway because of all the environmental factors, but I think folks are starting to use 311 much more frequently. And I encourage that. I'm not concerned about the number of complaints. And the other big piece is if you're dealing with an inspector or the department, and I know people are nervous and concerned, that first phone call is already in the system. So I've got, and I went through my complaints just through the COVID process. I've got addresses with 10 and 12 complaints, but in actuality, we're working on the same complaint. So we're doing some things electronically in order to deal with that. Commissioner and I and Kelly Mackey with our IT folks have talked about that. That's another big piece, but 311 is a huge, huge source for all of us. It's a great tracking mechanism, and it's a great way for people to get their complaint in there and for us to answer it. And the last piece is, and Mr. Corrigan said this as well, people are home now. You see a lot more when you're home. I mean, I'm home today working because I've got all my resources here, and all I hear is construction trucks driving by, and I hear dogs barking and things. I see things during the day that I don't normally see. That's characteristic across the city. People working from home, you're more likely to know what's going on in your neighborhood, and you're starting to realize more and more what's going on in your neighborhood. So it's actually a good thing in some cases. It works out very well, but I think people have been very, very helpful as far as giving us that information. I had a great walk with Councilor Breeden. We went down in Lower Alston. Nice job, Councilor. Councilor found a source of rat activity in a back alley. So, Commissioner, if we're looking to add a body, I think we have our candidate. That was excellent. And the councilor's got a great rapport with the people down there. So we've developed some pretty good relationships, and we have a landlord down there who owns multiple properties on one of the private ways down there. We've got that landlord in the queue. That landlord's replacing a dumpster and doing all the things that we do. But it's a collective effort. And the last thing I'd like to say is,
can you touch on construction?
Absolutely, I'm going to. That's going to be my last.
Multilingual efforts.
Absolutely. Construction is a big component of rodent activity, but it's a big component at the beginning, particularly at the beginning. But as Councilor Flaherty once again said, we've been monitoring construction sites a little more frequently. So excavation could cause an uptick in rodent activity. It doesn't cause new rodent activity, but it uproots them, it moves them from their home. New water and sewer lines. Obviously, rodents live in the sewer system. So new water and sewer lines, things of that nature can in fact cause an uptick in activity. Our inspectors have become much more diligent, and we've become much more critical of rodent control plans for construction projects across the city. We've gone out to sites and seen inadequate pest control, 2 bait stations on a site where they're building a 12-unit building. So we've asked them to up their pest control. Inspectors are going back to some of our areas where we've experienced some particular issues due to construction. They're going back weekly, and the companies are providing weekly reports as to the pest control that's being conducted on those sites. We're really starting to push the envelope a lot more on construction. Now, the city ordinance requires anybody who applies for a lawn form short form demo, test borings, test pits, all of those things require a sign off at our Rodent Control Division. So that means they need to come into the department, or obviously now do it electronically, provide your own control information. And an inspector goes out and then does an inspection prior to construction or at the very beginning of the construction. That ordinance has been in effect for quite a while. It's a very, very good tool for us to address any type of construction related rodent control. And the other piece is also allows us to put it on those construction companies that if in fact, or even a private homeowner who's doing their work, if in fact their project is causing rodent activity, they're required to assist. So we've got a number of different pieces. And Commissioner, the last thing I wanted to talk about is the environmental services staff and inspectors. I am probably the most fortunate manager in city government to have such a dedicated group of people. As Councilor Sabi George said, they do things that people don't really like to do. They do them better than anybody nationally. We've been lauded nationally for many, many years as having one of the better rodent control programs in the country. That being said, we can always get better. We can always do better, but we're as good as our staff. Our inspectors are dedicated professionals. They do their job to the best of their ability. They're creative. They do aggressive enforcement when they have to, and they work with a constituent with a soft shoe if they have to as well. Communication is the key across the board. If we all communicate, as our constituents and as our city employees and city councilors, if we communicate between one another, I think we can probably knock this problem down.
Thank you. Thank you, Assistant Commissioner Boucher. And
Thank you.
I was just wondering if Steve Tenkel is on yet. Steve, are you on? Okay, we'll wait for Steve. We'll get to Steve when he comes back on. At this time, I'm going to ask my colleagues to ask questions to the panelists, but before I do that, I just want to say thank you to the panelists for providing excellent information. It's informative, it's helpful, and I know neighbors across the city will be educated and know that this public health issue, this quality of life issue is being addressed by real professionals that know this subject very well. So I want to say thank you to the commissioner and to the assistant commissioner as well. Councilor Braden, I'm going to ask if you want to start off the question period.
Thank you so much, Councillor Flynn. Thank you, Commissioner Irish, and thank you, Leo. I did enjoy I called it our little rat safari that we did down in Alston. I learned so much about how you look at a situation and figure out what the problems are. You are a professional, and I learned so much about the issues that contribute to rodent activity in the neighborhood. And so thank you so much for that. It was very enlightening. I just had a question about whether, what is the protocol for construction? You know, a lot of the neighbors often say, oh, this problem was not the problem until they started building somewhere. Is there a particular protocol for monitoring construction?
Yes, there is, Councilor. So at the beginning of the construction project, as I said prior, anybody who pulls a short form demo, anybody who pulls an ALT permit, an erect permit, any lawn form requires a rodent control sign off. So the process and procedure would be at the inception of the project, they would have to come in. They have to submit that pest control report and their level of service to us prior to the permit being issued. So the permit can't be issued if there's existing rodent activity. Once again, as I said, it can certainly create an uptick. The construction can create an uptick, but once again, we do require them to maintain that level of pest control throughout the project. That being said, we're not there every day, but if in fact there is an uptick and we do get a complaint, there are different things that we can do. We can incorporate the building department into the process as well and let the building department know we're experiencing an uptick in rodent activity. We need to reach out to the contractor, let them know that this is what we expect. We do that as well because they provide a contact name and number at the beginning of the project. So that's the person that we're required to, and that's the person that we will deal with throughout. But there are multiple sanctions that we can impose, including the building department taking a good long peek at it.
Very good. Thank you. That's good to know. And are there particular regulations about the number of bins that are required for a household? You know, I think, as you said, we're generating a lot more trash because we're living at home these days. But, you know, I do know in our neighborhood there are households with a lot of folks, and the landlord doesn't seem to be providing enough trash receptacles. Is there a particular number that are required or recommendation?
Not a particular number, but they are required to provide receptacles that are large enough or numerous enough to contain the trash up to the time of collection. So that is a violation of the state sanitary code if in fact they're not providing enough receptacles. We can issue a violation for that. It's, as I said, it's a violation of the state sanitary code with regard to trash storage. So absolutely, there's a specific, not a specific number, but there's a specific regulation that governs that.
That's good to know. Thank you. And the other thing is, I was doing a little background research, and I was reading about rats in parks in New York, and they were lauding the effectiveness of a big belly compressing trash bin. And I don't know what your thoughts are on that particular approach to helping with our trash disposal.
So it's funny, I received an email a couple of weeks ago from one of the sales folks from Big Belly. I'm the wrong person to send it to. That being said, they can be effective, but they laud them as rodent-proof receptacles. They're not. Rats can get into a hole the size of a quarter. They can chew through concrete. They can find their little nooks and crannies. And if those big bellies aren't maintained, they're very, very expensive to maintain and repair. So in some instances, they could be effective. I'm not saying they're not effective, but I think the company is in the middle of a big marketing piece right now. And I knew that right away as soon as I got the email and the content of the email. The good thing about the big bellies, and Steve, you might know a little bit more in the public works, but good thing is, you know, you can monitor them electronically. There are a lot of different aspects of them that are really advantageous, but once again, I think the key is having enough receptacles to store the trash up to the time of collection.
Very good. Thank you, Leo. I'll let some other folks ask their questions. I think I've had my time. Thank you.
Thanks, Councilor.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Braden. Councilor Bach?
Thank you, Councilor Flynn. And thanks again to the whole team. That was very educational. And I'll just say that from my office's side, we've really appreciated all the help with a lot of acute situations that have cropped up in the last few months. I guess the question I had, it connects to something that Council President Janey mentioned. So you all know that there was a shift to a 6 a.m. Trash pickup start time. And there was a lot of concern about it in the neighborhoods I represent, especially the ones where people don't use bins, right? Where you just put the trash out on the street. And particularly because it's just, you know, that hour earlier from 6 to 7 makes it harder for people to get up and put the trash out in the morning as opposed to the night before. And so I was just wondering, I'm still hearing from people a desire to go back to the 7 o'clock time. I know that there's been an increase in residential trash during the pandemic, and so the earlier start time is helpful to the crews. I was wondering if there's any prospect of like a tracker or something that allows people to kind of know when the trash trucks are actually going to roll through their neighborhood. Because one of the things I've heard from people, especially those working from home, is, you know, if there was that technological capacity, they would just hold it and put their trash out, you know, shortly before the truck was coming their way. But it's not quite predictable enough always for them to do that. And so I'm just curious, as we kind of think about all options to deal with this issue, whether there's been any conversation about something along those lines.
So Council, that would be more of a Public Works related question. Public Works oversees the trash collection for the city. That being said, I mean, quite frankly, I'm a 5:45 guy, so I put my trash out in the morning, only because I'm a firm believer in the fact, and it's a proven fact, that the less time the trash is on the street, the better. So I know I don't know the particulars, but you're kind of in an area where I don't, quite frankly, oversee that department, but I do it in the morning, and I'm a big morning person as far as trash goes. We encourage folks, if they can, to put it out at that time in the morning, because it's as it's starting to get light out, our friends are starting to go back to sleep. We hope, Yeah. So it's a bit, for lack of a better way to say it. But yeah, Public Works handles the trash collection and regulations.
Yeah, and I'll take it up with Chief Osgood. I just think, I'm actually a 6 a.m. Once you hear the trash truck, I can still get downstairs out of bed that way. But I do think it's obvious that pushing it back an hour earlier just makes that much harder for a lot of people. So I'll follow up with him on that. I guess one question I have for you is, how do you guys approach, and maybe you covered this when you were out with Councilor Braden, but recently I've had a number of situations where there's really rats up and down a whole alleyway. And obviously the tricky thing is, like, you don't sort of want to solve one property on the alleyway's problem just to push them down to another. So I'd love to understand kind of how you guys deal with those larger swaths like that.
That's one of the most important concepts of rodent control. Going out to a complaint at one address and dealing with that one address doesn't resolve your problem. So if it's a problem on the street, you're inspecting all of the addresses. If it's a problem in the alley, you're inspecting the whole alley, and anywhere around it, anywhere that you think that rat activity may be emanating from, you have to do a complete inspection of that entire area. So if this is a particular alley, Council, please email it to me. Of my guys go up there. If it's a public alley, we'll bait the public alley. Mm-hmm. The city will do public way baiting. So we bait those problems those problem calls you get about parks. We get those problem calls that there's a hole in the sidewalk, light poles. Sometimes a light pole has a burrow in it, or a tree pit in a street. Our guys handle all those complaints, and we do the pest control for that.
Great. Yeah, no, I think you guys have been out to deal with one in one of my neighborhoods, and I may have another coming your way. No, thanks so much for that. And my last question is just in terms of the regulations. I know recently we've had also code enforcement's help with removing some excess empty dumpsters that were just becoming a dumping ground. And this was in the Fenway. But we have had issues with dumpsters where we can't get a landlord to add a lid to them. And I'm just wondering whether there's a rule about them having to have a cover that's securable on top.
So every receptacle is required to have tight fitting covers. That's a dumpster, a barrel. What we do in a lot of situations is we'll encourage folks to use the barrels with the attached lids. Makes it much easier, particularly if you're a landlord. Makes it much easier for your tenants to flip the lid open and flip the lid closed. That being said, I mean, we were all 21 at one time, and not as responsible as we should be, but we encourage that. But they're required to have tight fitting covers on any receptacle. That's a dumpster, that's a trash caddy, that's a barrel, that's a recycle bin. All of them are required to have tight fitting covers. So, and if it's a dumpster, a bulk refuse receptacle, we can issue a site cleanliness warning and then a violation. So the site cleanliness violation is a $1,000 fine. So it's significant. So it gives us the teeth that we need to deal with the bulk refuse receptacles. So if that, once again, it's a particular location, absolutely get it to me. We'll have somebody out there hopefully this afternoon.
Great. Thank you so much. And
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chairman, those are all my questions.
Thank you, Councilor Bork. The next person is Councilor Flaherty. Before we go to Councilor Flaherty, Shane, can you just check? Steve Tinkle is having difficulty getting into into the meeting, could you follow up with him, please?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Shane. Councilor Flaherty?
Thank you, Chairman Flynn, to Leo Boucher. Leo, you had mentioned that you believe that there's been an increase in the population due to kind of the last couple of mild winters. Do we have any idea or ballpark estimate as to how many rats, or particularly Norwegian rats, we have in Boston in the thousands? Any idea?
Not even a clue, but most folks don't do that. The entomologist can do that. I can reach out to somebody that can do a calculation on that. We focus on locations, Counselor, focus on the causative effects, but it's actually not a bad project right now. So I will definitely reach out and get a number if I can, or a proposed number.
I guess it's probably easy to measure what we can see when they're up and out visible, but I got to assume that there's a lot of activity that we don't see or goes
Sure.
undetected or unreported. And just curious
So as I
to kind of
said,
get a
like-
sense as to what that number is compared to other cities. And if for me, it would be important just to make sure that we're staying ahead of it and or
Okay.
we're putting a dent in it. But and then maybe just talk, as you and I have talked about it, maybe more for the edification of my colleagues is just that the dry ice and that technology that's available, and are we using it? I know there was a little bit of a snag early on with respect to whether, I don't know if it was claims of proprietorship or if it was, there was some litigation I think ensued, but I know that it's an effective tool for us, particularly for the rats that are burrowed, under parks and under buildings and stuff. But maybe just shed a little light as to how that technology works.
So we're back on the docket with dry ice. It was a long process. We had to figure out a mechanism to do it. In order to explain why we weren't using it, I have to do a brief history, very brief. So we were dealing with some Harvard University folks about pest control, and CO2 came up, and one of the professors said to a pest control guy, why don't we look at using dry ice? It's the same chemical compound, it's CO2. It can be buried into the burrows and it emanates through the burrow system. And quite frankly, it euthanizes the rats in the burrow system. So we started to do it, and we used it very heavily. So at the time we started, the price for us to buy 50 pounds of dry ice was $25, which wasn't a bad day. Ultimately, what happened was there was a complaint lodged with the EPA that said it was being used as a pesticide, and because it was being used as a pesticide, it needed to be registered. So it became registered. The only company that has a registration for it, and they call it rat ice now, no different chemical compound, nothing's changed, is Bell Labs. So for us to use dry ice, we have to purchase labels from a pesticide company, Univar, up in Woburn, who's the only local vendor. We have to take those labels to Rockland Dry Ice Corporation, who's the only licensed vendor for dry ice. And we have to pick it up there. During COVID, we added a 6 a.m. shift to our department for rodent control. So what we've done is we've got an inspector who fortunately lives close enough to Woburn that he can pick up the stickers. He'll bring the stickers in, and my early morning crew will go down and pick up the dry ice. So we're going to start using it heavily again in the public parks first. Common, public garden. And the difference between the dry ice and the poison is there's no chance of residual poison. So a dog can't dig it up, a cat can't dig it up, another animal can't dig it up. It stays in the burrow system, so that it's being applied in the burrow system completely. And just to give you a little background, we did an experiment when we first started it in a cemetery in Boston. We did 10 burrows with poison, we did 10 burrows with dry ice. Of the 10 burrows with poison, 7 reopened. Of the 10 burrows with dry ice, 3 reopened. We did a second application of dry ice and the burrows didn't open again. We did a second application of poison and 3 opened. So it's very effective. It's very effective. But what's happened is, and I don't know how it happened, it's way above my pay grade on the federal level. Bell Labs has the license for it, and we have to use those two vendors. So we've set up a mechanism where we can start using it, and we're gonna probably do a weekly run to Rockland and pick it up.
Right. And you and I have talked about that. I believe that's our best tool.
I
Wish we
love
could
it.
buy it by the boatload. Seems like there's a little bit of a monopoly going on with rat ice that we can discuss at another point, but it's a tool, particularly for the boroughs that we saw pay some huge dividends in some of the parks
Absolutely.
that we had focused and targeted a few years ago before it got a little off track. So it's exciting to hear that we're sort of back on track with the dry ice, and again, huge tool for us. So that's good stuff. So I appreciate the intel on that, Leo, and obviously, hopefully that was helpful to my colleagues to know that we have this available. It's a great tool to go along with some of the other stuff that we have in the arsenal to combat rodent infestation. So, good stuff. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No other questions.
Thank you, Councilor Flaherty. Before we get to Councilor Asabi George, I know Steve Tinkle is on the call. He's with Public Works, but just wanted to give him an opportunity to give an opening statement, because some of our questions may be relating to Public Works. Steve, are you on? Steve, I can hear you, not all that well, but could you try again?
I have an connection issue where it's going in and out, but I listen to the phone here, and I've worked along with Joe. Got trash too, placement of trash, it's placed up, lighting lids, and that's something we do day to day. We have 7-day-a-week coverage, especially in Boston.
Steve, I think we lost you there. You weren't coming in clearly. Maybe Shane, can you go back again and try to help out Steve, please? And in the meantime, I will ask Councilor Asabi George to continue with questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and look forward to Steve's testimony, because I'm sure that he has a lot to add, especially based on his long experience here at the city. I have found this morning's presentation so far very informative. Didn't sort of think I could learn this much about rats and rodent control and all that. So just, for me, it's been more of an education. And again, how do we, in figuring out the best way for us as a city to respond to both the quality of life concerns and issues that the growing rat population and rodent population in particular have on our city and on our residents, but really to better understand the public health issues and the public health concerns that a growing population might have. So just, for me, there are no questions. I continue to learn and appreciate the leadership of the chair and the sponsor today. Thank you, Councilor Flynn.
Thank you, Councilor Asabi George. I'm going to take Councilor Mejia out of order. Councilor Mejia, some questions?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for allowing me to go out of order, Councilor Flynn. I really do appreciate it. And want to just thank President Council Janey too for allowing me to go in. I have a 12 o'clock, but I am curious, just really quick, in terms of just language access and whether or not the information that we're communicating is, my question is always all about interpretation and how we're engaging folks who don't speak English. I think they also have a responsibility in that. And I'm also curious about the number of trash cans that are in neighborhoods. I've seen in certain neighborhoods there are more trash cans than others, and I've seen trash just pile up. So I'm just curious about what we're doing to add more trash barrels in certain spaces. And then just to go bouncing off of Councilor Bach's comment about the tracker, does the city keep a centralized dashboard of complaints about the rats that people see? And this could be helpful for people who live in the area with lots of rats, so that they can be a little bit more cautious about how they're handling garbage and opening and closing doors. And I know we're talking about rodents and rats, but I'm also curious about mice. And I'm going to assume that the mice are also part of the rodent situation, because sometimes they come into your house. And just curious about whether or not you've heard anything in regards to mice? Or are you guys just, when you talk about rats, you're also including the mice and the ones that are cohabitating in people's homes too? Anyone could answer those questions or not. I'm just curious. You could pick any of them and just answer whichever one you want. I'm fine.
So, no, thank you, Councilwoman. We can answer them. So for the information that's provided on rodent control, it is multilingual. And also our team of inspectors, our licensed professionals, it's a multilingual team as well. With respect to when we talk about rodents, we're focusing more on the rats as opposed to the mice, but we do track mice as well. And predominantly our housing inspection division is the division that responds to infestations of mice and working with property owners and tenants to address those issues on a regular basis. Lastly, your question about dumpsters, receptacles, are you referring to public spaces?
Yeah, like on the street, like the street corners, just more visibility across in different parts of the neighborhoods. Like those trash cans are hard to come by.
Yeah, so for that one, I would defer to Code Enforcement and Public Works for that one.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I just want to say we do see Mr. Tinkle on screen if you want to answer those code enforcement questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Shane. Maybe at this time, I'm sorry, Councilor Mejia, did you have any further questions?
No, thank you, Councilor Flynn. And I have to run because I have another Zoom to get to. And thank you so much for your time, and thank you all for participating. Thank you.
Thank you. And before, I'm going to have Councilor Janey is next, and then we'll go to Steve Tenko.
Thank you so much.
Councilor Janey.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and I'll be brief. I'm really interested in following up along the lines of Councilor Bach's question, understanding that trash pickup is a whole nother city department, but this change, there was still a worry that the change of moving from 7 to 6 would create an increase in rodents. And so what I would still be very interested in having is the data that tracks that change and whether or not we did see an increase. Now, it may be hard to determine given that this is in fact the perfect storm, as was outlined earlier by a panelist, that the change in time is the reason, but I would be interested if we could look back and see when that change happened, did we see an increase of rodents? You know, this is a big challenge for all of us. And I also heard comments of an increase on illegal dumping, and that, you know, school buildings that have dumpsters that are not being used and people are coming to dump stuff. But illegal dumping has been a big issue in my district pre-COVID. So there are empty lots that I have in my district. I'm sure others around, there are other councilors that could talk about their districts as well, but these empty lots can often be a magnet for illegal dumping, and not, you know, someone taking their garbage bag and putting it inside of a dumpster, but literally leaving whatever, whether it's tires, whether it's old computers or televisions, whether it's their own personal trash. That has been an ongoing issue. And I just wonder, I know we've been speaking a lot, talking about the rodent situation, which is really important. I wonder if we could spend a little bit of time, and maybe Mr. Tanko will speak to this issue. I know we've been working with him around the lots in my district and the illegal dumping that happens there. But I just wonder if we could spend a little bit of time on that issue as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So 2 things, the data around the change in time and whether or not we saw an increase in rodents, and then just a little more time talking about the illegal dumping issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Council President. Commissioner Irish, do you want to take the first one, and then we'll get Steve Tenko after, or Leo?
Counselor, I'll take the question about the times.
Okay.
So, Councilor Cheney, one of the things that I talked about earlier was the fact that the less time trash is on the street, the better. That's my biggest piece. So, and I don't know a lot about what transpired as far as the collection times go. We spend more time dealing with the private properties and how they store their trash. That being said, trash placed out in the street does cause rodents, and we have had areas where we've gone to that, the bags are chewed and things like that. In some of our neighborhoods, we don't have places where people can put barrels and receptacles, so they place their trash out in plastic bags. That's a perfect food source as well. I'll do a little bit of digging. I'll go back a little further in the year to see if I can figure out if the numbers changed at all.
That would be helpful. I would be
Yeah.
helpful because this
I'll
is a
play around-
neighborhood too.
I'll have to play around with it a little bit.
Yeah, it's very
remember,
dense,
that
and then they
option too.
lack the storage for barrels because we're talking about row houses that are connected and don't necessarily have a little driveway to store their barrel. And so it's been a very difficult change for this neighborhood to navigate. And one concern was that it would lead to an increase. So I'm just hoping that we can have some data to know one way or the other. And then that we can continue to think of creative ways around trash storage and less time. I was excited. It's funny that Councilor Bach mentioned in her questions a tracker, because I was thinking today is trash day. No, actually it was yesterday. See, this is why I need a tracker. I've got Mondays and Thursdays as trash day. And one thing I was thinking about is, oh, it'd be great to know when they're actually coming. Even though you're gonna put it in a barrel, the barrels, some of these rodents are very advanced. In fact, I don't know, some of them might not even be rodents. I don't know what you call the raccoons, but they have the hands and they can open this stuff up. So that would be helpful. Can you speak to the illegal dumping issue that is beyond like school dumpsters, but really the stuff that we see? I saw a church member from a church near my house at the corner of my street walk from that church, take that church's trash and put it on my street on a trash day. So, I mean, there's all kind of dumping that people do for whatever reasons that they're doing it. That is not illegal. That is illegal and should not be happening. Could you speak to those kinds of issues?
So if that building is zoned as a church, they're required to secure private pickup. And that's what they're not eligible for city pickup. So that happens. I mean, we've had issues where, and if Steve is still on, he can attest to this. We've had issues where folks have come over the border from Milton and other towns and Newton on the other side and put their trash out for a trash collection, One of the huge problems. Steve, are you still on? I don't want to overspeak for code enforcement. I'm just talking about it from our perspective. That trash coming in doesn't make our job any easier, because now we've got somebody else's household trash coming in and adding to our pile, so to speak. But that is illegal dumping. It's a violation of the city ordinance for illegal dumping, and our code enforcement would oversee that.
Thank you.
If the church is that of an issue, I would have an off the cuff with Director Tankel after this.
Thank you.
So I think Director Tankel, he's still having some connection issues. So I will add that the city does have a trash app that does send notifications on trash day. So I would encourage folks to go to their website and sign up.
Yeah, does it track though? So it's kind of like the Where's My School Bus?
Yeah.
Tracking is what we're kind of talking about. Not a reminder that today is my trash day, but your garbage truck is 20 minutes away. Make sure
Something more real
your
time.
barrels are out. It's that kind of thing.
Okay. I get it.
Is that something that we have or something that
I'm not sure, but I would defer to Steve on that. But
Okay.
I don't know if it does all of that, but it does at least at the bare minimum give you your trash day. But I also would want to say there was a question earlier about 311 complaints. That data is available on 311 complaints. I believe it's an open data source that's available to the public.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Council President. Let me try one more time to see if Steve is with us. Steve Tankel, are you with us? Nope. Okay, before I open it up to the next panel, I had a couple of questions and comments. Maybe Commissioner and Leo, if you want to take an opportunity to respond. Received a question from Scott in the South End. Reached out to me, reported there's a lot of rats on Pembroke and Tremont Street area, the South End. But he mentioned when the case is closed on, I believe, 311, it's VICOR, which is violation corrected. Residents are wondering if we can be more clear about what that means, and if when closing these cases, can we provide what information was actually done or what was accomplished?
That is usually recorded in the record in the system. I'll double check on the technical, but if that violation is closed, there are usually comments that accompany that. So let me find out exactly what happened there.
Thank you, Leo.
Was there a specific address? Because if that's happening, I mean, one of the big issues is if the violation was corrected, either A, they didn't find, they should be putting no violation if they didn't find a violation. If the violation is corrected, that means that the violation doesn't exist. So let me take a look at that. Counselor, is that a specific address? Just I can do a query. I'll do a query.
Yeah, Leo, I have a specific. Okay. And then my final question is, Leo, I actually worked with you and worked with your team in Public Works on collapsible bins in the South End last year. I think it was with 8th Street Neighborhood Association, Michael Almond. We had a pilot program. But residents of downtown areas have no space for a trash barrel. So they had to put trash directly outside, and then obviously rodents would pick at it. But the collapsible bins are lightweight, can be folded up, stored inside. So residents can put trash inside instead of just putting it directly outside. Again, I remember working with you and Michael, and Steve Fox was with us, and I believe Steve Tenkel, we had coffee in the South End. I was wondering what the results were from that pilot, and if it can be expanded from a certain neighborhood and maybe expanded to more neighborhoods in the city.
Steve, do you have the information on that one?
Yeah, I can see him on the video, just not sure if he's able to respond. Steve, can you hear us?
I can.
Okay, Steve.
I can hear everyone.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. I don't know if you want to kind of respond to my question, but also give your opening comments as well, whatever you think might be helpful to this hearing.
Yeah, I had to move location. I was getting a real bad reception. I've heard most of it. I'd just like to touch on the trash issues. We have worked with Leo off and on for a long time and continue simply because of the rodent issue and the way the trash is stored or placed throughout the city. We are aware of locations that do not have the room for barrels. It's been a problem for a long time. But we try to work with the constituent also, not just giving them the fine. We educate them. As far as the illegal dumping, I believe Leo touched on that also. We have a lot of areas where what's considered illegal dumping is when somebody brings it purposely from another location and drops it off within the city boundaries, whether it be a school, other facilities that the city owns and manages. Those are considered illegal dumping. A lot of the misconception is if number 20 such and such street puts it right next door at number 22 such and such street. We don't really consider that an illegal dumping. That's considered improper trash disposal. And we'll try to educate them on that.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. And Steve, I know I work with you and the member of the panel that's going to be on next is Mary Chen from the Asian American Citizens Association. And we do a lot of work along with Eric Prentice. So I want to say thank you, Steve, for your great work as well. Illegal dumping too. I have a lot of illegal dumping in Chinatown. I had several cases on Hudson Street.
Correct.
And then I called up Public Works, and Public Works came and we cleaned up the area. So I'm very, very grateful for Public Works. But on Hudson Street, Beach Street, I think I chased a guy who was a contractor. He dropped off his old wood right on Hudson Street, and I couldn't see his license plate, so I had to chase him through the south end in Chinatown. I couldn't catch him. He went right up into the highway. But I'm wondering, how often do we have illegal dumping taking place, and what is the fine, Stephen?
As you said, Captain, well, it's different. With the vehicle, it would be $1,000 fine, Counselor, but it's very tricky. If we don't catch them in the process, whether it be by the public reporting it to 311 or calling it in or some other nature, or certain areas of the city where it's happened more frequently, we have private cameras that those people give us access to so we can see who did it, maybe get a plate number, truck, car, whatever it might be, and then we'll issue the appropriate fines after an officer's gone there and verified that it did in fact take place. But without that, if we do not find anything on site indicating where or who it may have came from, our hands are sort of tied, and then we call it in to get it removed if it's on our property. If it's on state property, we'd reach out to them and have them remove it. But it's a hit or miss situation when it comes to an illegal dumping.
Steve, if residents across the city see illegal dumping or they have it on video, they can send it to you, but would they send it to you through 311?
They can, yes, they can. They can send it into code enforcement through 311. We ask that they not get involved because some of these things can get pretty tricky at times, and just report what they saw. We'll take it from there. We'll do the investigation. And if we can issue a violation, we will. We'll investigate it anyway, and they'll get an answer back on the 311 app once complete.
Okay. And then my final question, whether it's for Steve or the commissioner or Leo, but what can we do? What's our message in terms of public outreach to residents? Can we engage the residents in a public awareness campaign on illegal dumping, on pest control, on helpful hints what residents can do or shouldn't do, or giving residents some good written information on how they can be more proactive as well to make improvements on their own on these quality of life issues?
On every aspect of code enforcement, whether it's the officer visiting or answering a 311, whether it's after the fact and they received a violation, we continue to educate the public, whether it be a management company or private citizen, on how, when, and where they should store, get rid of, and how to get rid of their trash so that it won't repeat itself for them. I believe the website has a lot of good information. The cityofboston.gov website, Public Works, showing people in pictures that may have a language barrier. It shows them the do's and don'ts of how to put your trash out and store your trash.
I see. For us, we're working on to finalize a virtual workshop for October 5th. So as soon as we get those details fine-tuned, I'd like to share that with you, Councilor, and the rest of the council to help advertise that. It's a virtual workshop where we're going to get into a lot of details about our rodent control and the work that environmental services and the ISD housing division does, and also the best ways that folks can access our services during COVID-19.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, Steve. And I think that would be very helpful. We have a young city A lot of young people have moved into Boston, and at least 4 or 5 nights a week, these people are eating pizza and Spuckies and all kinds of food. And then they just disregard their trash, whether it's on the street or in their yard. But a public awareness campaign would be a critical part of making improvements on these quality of life issues. So I want to say thank you, Commissioner, for the work that you've been doing, as well as Leo and Steve and Eric and Dan Manning and Aisha Miller and so many others, John Elric. But I don't have any further questions for this panel. We're going to go into a second panel. You can stay on if you want, but it's not necessary. But we have some other guests for the second panel. So we're gonna shift right now to the second panel. But on behalf of my colleagues on the City Council, I want to say thank you to the ISD team. I want to say thank you to the Public Works team and the Mayor's team as well for engaging us in a very informative discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So yeah, we'll log off, but we'll continue to watch and take notes. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And at this time, thank you. And at this time, we're going to shift to the second panel. I do apologize that the first panel ran a little late, but it was a very informative discussion. Some great information provided by our city employees. But having said that, let me go right into our second panel. Mr. Anthony Disidoro, who's the president of the Allston Civic Association, Mary Chin, who's the executive director of the Asian American Civic Association, and Edward Heisch, also from the Asian American Civic Association as well, and Amy Goon. So just wanted to open it up to first to Anthony Disidoro. I see him on the phone, on the video. I knew Mr. and Mrs. Disidoro. They were wonderful people. They had a cottage right near my in-laws up in Maine. And what I loved especially about going up to visit my in-laws was seeing Mrs. Disidoro. She used to make the best thing of Italian meat sauce. So I would go up there and she'd have a big bowl of spaghetti and a big thing of meat sauce for me. So that's the reason I really like Tony Disidoro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Anthony Disidoro. I am president of the Allston Civic Association. I want to thank Councilor Flynn and Councilor Braden for sponsoring this hearing and elevating what is becoming an increasingly serious public health and safety issue in our neighborhoods. Despite reassurances from Inspectional Services Department in the past, the situation in Allston-Brighton continues to worsen. Multiple sightings on any given day is becoming the norm. As reported on Boston 25 in July 2020, quote, the biggest surge in rodent complaints is coming out of Allston-Brighton during the pandemic, an 88% increase compared to last year, end quote. Let me quickly focus on 3 main areas. First, real estate development. In 2019, Allston led the city's neighborhoods by a wide margin in approved residential square footage at 1,365,140. We are well on our way to post similar impressive numbers in 2020. At the same time, numerous prior approvals, shovels are already in the ground. This extremely strong demand for housing, commercial, retail, and lab office space results in construction that disturbs their nesting ground or hiding spots, forcing them out into the open. Although the city places certain expectations on developers to control rodents at their construction sites for Article 80 projects, the city should demand, as part of the construction mitigation, that developers and institutions help finance rodent control activities, including baiting and trapping, for direct abutters of the project. Second, in a community such as Alston, where in 2018, 80.8% of the neighborhood population are young adults, and the owner occupancy rate was 11.9% compared to a Boston rate of 35.2%. And given the transient nature of our residents, we must hold property owners even more accountable to ensure proper property management by removing food and water sources and items that can provide them shelter. Also, Inspectional Services Department needs to be vigilant in requiring that any property owner seeking zoning or building code relief from the Zoning Board of Appeal certify that their property as a source is rodent-free. There is nothing like attending an abutters meeting with an investor looking to expand the footprint and number of units in their building, which will result in higher profitability, having rats running around his property because one was negligent in effectively managing the property. There is a community responsibility here that is undeniable. Third, the infestation levels around our public spaces, including parks, libraries, cemeteries, and schools, is totally unacceptable and violates the social compact between the city and its residents. Let me be clear. Alston faces an increasing public health and safety crisis, given the potential of disease spread from rodent droppings. Also, due to the pandemic that has diminished their food supply, residents are at risk given the possibility of unusual or aggressive rodent behavior. Let's not give our residents another reason to permanently leave our city, especially families who form whatever community fabric we still have remaining. Also, let's not be derelict in our duty, which forces residents to take matters into their own hands and disperse poison and traps in an irresponsible manner, endangering people and other forms of life. The city needs to step up and recognize that there are consequences to the public policy they continue to pursue. A proportional and consistent response is required to ensure quality of life issues will never take a back seat, and that we value the health and safety of every resident who calls Boston their home. I extend an open invitation to the Inspectional Services Department to present at the monthly Alston Civic Association meeting, whose membership has expressed a strong desire for an update and Q&A session with administration officials. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Tony. And the next person on the panel is actually several people from the Asian American Civic Association. I think you're all in the same room together. So wasn't sure if Mary wanted to start or how you wanted to do it, but wanted to open it up to the Asian American Civic Association.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Is that Mary?
Okay, yes. Yes, I have a number of people in the room here at AACA, some representing actual business interests. Auntie Amy Goon is not in the room. She is at home, but she is on the line. Let me first thank you very much for putting this together. We've been frustrated over at AACA and in Chinatown for a while, but we do appreciate the work that's been done by Leo and by Steve Tinkle and Eric. Even though I say that we have been friends working together on a cleanup Chinatown committee that's been going on for a few years. Sometimes I think that we can lock heads here, but I think it's for the betterment of this community, for the public health concerns of this community, and for the economic health of this community, because Chinatown is actually a business district with many restaurants and many other kinds of businesses. And having the community stay safe, become cleaner, is just something that we've been talking about for a while. Auntie Amy Goon reminded me this morning that the first Cleanup Chinatown event that she remembers was actually presented through Frank Chin, Uncle Frank, where and many of you may know that Frank was the purchasing agent for Boston for many years. And then in '85, Amy herself started a beautification committee that lasted for 25 years. So that family has really inspired me to continue to do the work with her. I would like to introduce to my right, Edward Shea, H-S-I-E-H, Shea, sounding like an Irishman, but basically very Chinese. He comes from a really strong background of environment work, and I'd like to hear from him today. Also to my left, I have the executive director of Buds and Blossoms Childcare, which is based in Boston. And that's Jeannie right here to my right. And then we have some people who work in Chinatown or actually live in Chinatown that are also invited today. So let me ask you, Edward, to speak.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn. So as Mary said, I do have a background in litter. So before I became COO of AACA, I spent about 7 years working on the state level in trash and recycling as executive director of a nonprofit dealing with the state. In fact, I dealt in public space recycling and litter in partnership with the MBTA and the city of Cambridge to launch an MBTA public space program to reduce litter there. So that's where I'm coming from in terms of my knowledge in this area. And I have to echo what Mary said. It's been great working with Steve, Eric, and Leo. They've come to our meetings and they've been very helpful. So several things I'll go over here first. So as several of the council members mentioned, like this problem in different neighborhoods has been going on even before the pandemic. Yeah. I mean, I walk through Chinatown. I've been in Chinatown in different capacities for over 16, 17 years. And, you know, if you walk down the street at 8 p.m. on certain days, you'll see all the restaurant trash on the curb, you know, in piles. A lot of it's not in a proper bin. And then that's also a problem that's exacerbated by the residential parts of Chinatown. And it becomes a problem. And so that's something I know that Steve has been working on hard to work with the neighborhood to reduce that issue, but it still happens to this day because, you know, education is tough. And so it heartened me to hear that you're increasing the number of code enforcement officers and that there are court cases out there right now to deal with the worst violators. But enforcement is one small part. I'm hoping that the council may take a look at the penalties that are put out there to see if there's any room to increase them or to change them, to increase that sort of impact on the neighborhood, to let people know this is not right to do. On top of that, the education, I think, is very difficult when you're dealing with a transient neighborhood where, a lot of the residents are businesses and not, people who stay here after a certain hour. So with that in mind, that sort of third leg of what, really is effective that they talk about when you talk about Keep America Beautiful research and whatnot, there's enforcement, education, and convenience. So convenience is something that I think several people on the previous panel touched upon, the idea of the bins. Chinatown is one of the areas that does suffer severely from lack of space to put bins. And so there has to be some sort of investment, some sort of innovation to make it happen. I mean, we see our neighbors at Downtown Crossing with their, I think it's called a BID. I think that stands for Boston Improvement District, where the neighborhoods come together to fund regular cleanups in terms of actual staff that's paid for to clean the area up. That's something that we'd be very interested in exploring here. Obviously, Chinatown is not as affluent as Downtown Crossing or the financial district. So if the city council could work with us to find ways to either fund that or to allow the neighborhood to put into that and contract out on its own instead of tying into whatever the normal system is, which is a slightly more expensive system. And the other angle to that too, a bid could be an innovation district too. So one thing we see in exemplars in the trash world, like Seattle, San Francisco, all those other areas, is that the neighborhood comes together and the city comes together to fund special approaches. And one thing that we see is, for example, changing zoning laws or permit laws, where if there's a new construction coming in, that the development is required to include some sort of neighborhood trash depository, where it's not just for that development, but for example, if all the restaurants had an area where they could store their trash until it's trash pickup day, that's something that could alleviate the storage problems where you put out the bags on the curb and then the rats just come to it. So I mean, just for example, we look out our window at AACA down on Tyler Street, and the building right across the street has all their bins right outside because that's the only place they can put them. So if there were a more communal area, like on this block, where they could store them safely, that would help alleviate that problem. And obviously that's not something easy to do when everything's already densely packed and developed, but as new permits come up and whatnot, that's something that could be considered.
Thank you. Thank you, Ed. And
I have Jeannie.
okay, if you could, maybe if you could keep your comments for one minute or so,
Sure.
if possible.
Good afternoon. So my name is Jean McKenna. I'm the director of Buds and Blossoms Child Care Center, which is located here at 87 Tyler Street. One of my biggest concerns is the trash on the sidewalks. Right now, because of the pandemic, we're not allowed to take the children to the public playgrounds. And so we have to take them outside for walks, and we have to go around bags or trash or needles. And so that's very dangerous for our young children in the community. And so I just wanted to make that well known to you, that these are the issues that we come across having a child care center here in Chinatown, and we're not the only center down here. So if we could find a solution to this problem, that would be wonderful.
Thank you. Mary, is there, do you
Yes.
want to recognize the other people that are there? I don't know if they need to give opening statements, but if you just want to recognize them.
Working in Chinatown? Okay, fine. Okay. Yeah, I wanted to conclude by really affirming all the hard work that ISD and code enforcement and Eric's team for public works, but what they put into Chinatown and into the other areas, particularly now that I'm hearing from Tony in the Alston Brighton area. Chinatown is unique, but not the only place in Boston that has a real problem with space. We really need to be tougher on the owners and landlords of our site, because they need to do what the law requires, which is to take care of their tenants. They need to make sure that there are barrels for their tenants. The people who live in this community sometimes are really totally ignorant of what they need to do with trash. So their most simple thing to do is to put it into little plastic bags and leave it on the street. So we're talking about illegal dumping, and we're talking about overflow of so-called city public barrels. That overflow is being caused by people who don't mean to break the law necessarily. They just take their trash and put it into public barrels. And then when that overflows, they leave those little trash bags all around the public barrels. And that just creates more and more opportunities for rodents and for seagulls to just trash the whole street. And and all the curbside. So we know that we can do more, but we need to do more with the people who need to make the change. The frustration and the frustration on our committee has been the fact that we don't see that a beautification day is the answer to the problems in Chinatown or in Alston Brighton. The problem will be to really have more code enforcement, higher fees, higher penalties, and have our community do our part, which is to change our behavior, educate ourselves, and then enforce ourselves. So I'll stop there, but thank you very much, Councilor Flynn, for making this possible to meet together.
Thank you, Mary, and thank you for your team there. With that, I'm going to open it up to Councilor Braden for questions to anyone on our panel. And then after Councilor Braden, I'll ask the remaining councilors that are still here with us to continue the Q&A. Councilor Braden?
I don't have any further questions. I really just want to thank everyone for their participation. I've learned a lot about the problem in the neighborhoods, especially our friends from Chinatown. Thank you for participating. And thank you, Tony, for raising up the issues in Alston Brighton. I look forward to really helping spread the word and get working with Tony and in our neighborhood, our local neighborhood associations, to try and get better buy-in in terms of what individual citizens and residents can do, and then also see what we can do with developers and see if they can help stem this problem at the source, so to speak. So I think this is a beginning of an ongoing conversation that I'm looking forward to working with folks on. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Braden. Councilor Bach, do you have any questions or final comments?
No questions. I just really want to thank the neighbors for the work you do every day, and also for the sort of proposed solutions you offered here. I mean, I heard Tony suggesting that, we really make construction folks responsible for helping to pay for baiting the neighborhood, right, and the adjacent folks. And I think the idea about Chinatown looking into a bid, which I know it took a long time for Downtown Crossing to establish, but I think has been a really meaningful and useful mechanism there. I really appreciate you all for the working it out, but also coming, to us as policymakers with possible solutions. And I think it's, as Councilor Braden said, like, the onus is on us to kind of think about what we can do to step things up. I think the additional code enforcement folks at ISD are great. I'm intrigued and excited about the sort of dry ice ramping up that was mentioned earlier. I represent the Boston Common and the Public Garden and the Fens, where we see a lot of boroughs that dry ice could be a potential solution to. So it's good to know that our city departments are working on things, but I think we also just need to think about how we can strengthen the regulatory regime around this. So thank you all so much. And thank you again to Councilor Flynn and Councilor Braden for calling this important hearing.
Thank you, Councilor Bach. I don't believe I have any other city council colleagues with us. So having said that, I do want to thank the panelists for being here, for your tremendous work, for Mary and her team in Chinatown, and so many of the organizations that are doing wonderful work. And I agree. I think we need to have more enforcement, but also increase the fines on people that intentionally disregard and disrespect the residents by illegal dumping. There's nothing worse than seeing someone throw their personal trash or even business trash onto the streets of our neighborhood or in our city, and from outside of Boston, come into Boston to litter and to ruin the neighborhood. So I agree. I think we need to have more enforcement, more fines as well, public awareness campaign, public education campaign, in everybody working together, putting that photos that you might have of illegal dumping into the 311 system, as Steve Henkel mentioned, and providing some information about the illegal dumping. It's happening all over the city in various neighborhoods. So having said that, I want to say thank you to my colleagues, Councilor Braden, Councilor Bach. I want to say thank you to my central staff from the Boston City Council for excellent work. Shane and Candace, I believe. Thank you for being on here and for working with us. It was a very informative meeting. I want to say thank you to Neil from the Mayor's Office, ISD, Public Works, and on behalf of my colleagues on the Boston City Council, I want to say thank you for people that are watching. And this is what my committee, I hope we will continue doing, is working on issues that impact residents, impact their quality of life, making sure we respond to these 311 requests or comments, getting back to people, trying to improve the lives of residents across the city. It's not a sexy topic to talk about, but it's the nuts and bolts of city government that's crucial in our neighborhoods. So having said that, I want to say thank you to Tony Disidoro and his tremendous work that he's done through Alston and Brighton, and his family as well, contributed so much to our city. And having said that, thank you, everybody, and looking forward to maybe having a working session, continue the conversation, maybe sometime over the next 60 days. Thank you very much, and thank you for joining this informative meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.